Hello, good morning, and welcome to this workshop on lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. My name is Peter Hertwig. I am head of unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. I have the pleasure to guide you through this event today. Unfortunately, I have to start the event with an apology. So we are terribly sorry that we had this technical incident that prevented us from starting on time. I hope you can still bear with us and follow us through this workshop. We will spend 2 hours for presenting and discussing the lump sum funding. We don't start from scratch with lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. We had a pilot in Horizon 2020 with a number of projects, and we are very happy and grateful that we can today also welcome 2 panelists who are actually involved in running 2 or 3 of these pilot projects. So I maybe start with introducing the whole panel, and our external panelists that I just mentioned are Elena Chavarria from the Vallhebron Institute of Oncology in Spain. Welcome, Ms. Chavarria. And we have Ms. Susanne Stoppel from the University Hospital in Tübingen, who is also involved even in 2 of the pilot projects on lump sums. And they will help us afterwards in the panel discussion to get more clarity based on actual experience with running lump sum projects. But before going into the panel discussion, we will have a short introductory presentation by another member of our panel of today, Ulrich Genschel, who will spend maximum half an hour with a few slides on introducing the whole topic of lump sum funding. And we will also have my other colleague, Bénédicte Charbonnel, who will then join the panel discussion and will in particular ask appropriate questions to our 2 external panelists. But the session is also interactive. That means we reckon with your comments, questions, and remarks. The feedback channel for you is Slido. So if you can, in parallel to watching the YouTube stream, go to a Slido, open Slido in a browser, sum together in one word. You also find all this information on how to access Slido in the event webpage that was distributed widely before. You can put there your questions, but I would also ask you to look at the questions that might be already there. And if you were about to ask a very similar question, don't ask the question again, but vote on the other questions that you would also have asked. And we will then in the question and answer session go through the questions in the order of number of likes, so that we start with the questions that are most popular and need a most urgent reply. I think I can stop here with my introduction. Thank you very much again for staying with us. Thank you in advance for asking interesting questions. And with this, I hand over to my colleague Ulrich Genschel for the short introduction on lump sum funding. Ulrich, please.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm going to take you through the lump sum system and how it works. One remark ahead is that you will keep coming back one aspect, and that is that lump sum funding is actually not that different from all other grants. We can, of course, not really cover every detail in this short presentation, but you will see where you will find additional information. And then, of course, we also have the Q&A session where your more detailed questions can be answered. So, why do we use lump sum funding in the first place? Following the test in Horizon 2020, there are 3 key reasons. The program needs to reduce the financial error rate that was considered far too high in the last years. And then, more importantly, perhaps, there is a big potential to simplify the program what we see is that the traditional actual cost system has been going through a lot of simplification steps through many years, and now we have reached a certain point of saturation. We cannot simplify it further, and we see that the actual cost system remains quite complex and error prone. So that is an avenue that we see is exhausted. So lump sum funding and other simplified forms of funding are our main avenue to achieve further simplification. And then thirdly, we have a focus on content, and that is stronger in lump sum funding than in traditional cost systems, where, of course, a lot of the work that's going on inside and outside is the financial management aspect. When we look at our beneficiaries and at the distribution of 42,000 unique beneficiaries in Horizon 2020, we see that the vast majority, like 3/4, had just 1 or 2 grants. These are almost all of those are small entities, SMEs, and newcomers. So these vast majority of beneficiaries, they don't have a lot of experience because they only ever participated once in the program, and they don't have the capacity, the administrative capacity to deal with the complexity of actual cost grants. So we want to have a system that works when you do your first proposal, that you don't need a long-standing experience, that you don't need a full apparatus in your own administration to deal with real costs. This kind of this kind of offices, EU offices and administrations that are well versed and have the experience to deal with actual cost, you find in the very biggest beneficiaries. But those beneficiaries, they are around about 0.5% of the total. You see that on the right-hand side in the graph. So we've tested lump sum funding in Horizon 2020, and we got rather positive feedback. We had 2 studies, 2 independent studies confirming that, one from the European Parliament, one from the European Commission. And the outcome is there is generally a positive attitude from users, but we certainly are aware that we still need to explain more. And this is why we do this kind of webinars and trainings and develop more guidance, and this is still ongoing. I want to go here into certain concerns and misunderstandings that come up frequently to preempt a little bit the discussion on those. So we are aware that some stakeholders are afraid of higher financial risks. They're afraid that lump sums may not be paid in the same way as they used to be paid in the actual cost system, but we don't see this materializing so far, and you'll see a slide later on that. Also, we don't see that there are fewer newcomers or fewer SMEs or less ambitious proposals in the pilot. So these concerns are being monitored, and if we see that any of those actually do materialize, we will certainly try and take corrective actions. Now, on the misunderstandings, that's perhaps even more important. One of the most fundamental ones is that lump sums will only ever be paid if there is a successful outcome. But it's very clear that in R&I funding, we cannot make reimbursement dependent on a success. What we make it dependent on is that the work was actually carried out. So it's not true that lump sums will only be paid when you have a successful outcome. So that's really a core principle, and I have to stress it a lot. Then partially completed lump sums will generally be paid if they couldn't be completed for a technical reason. So it's not true they will never be paid. And finally, in an actual cost grant, you also don't just need a correct invoice to be reimbursed. In the same way as in lump sum grants, you need to demonstrate that the project was implemented properly. So there's in fact not a big difference in that regard. So summarizing, we need to explain more. We know that we need to explain more the lump sum funding system. It's a new system, so there's a learning curve on all sides, and we are happy to support that. Now, how does lump sum funding work? It comes in 2 flavors. In option 1, we have a lump sum that is fixed in the call for proposals. In actual fact, currently there are very few calls like that. The only one open is the ERC proof of concept, which uses that system, a fixed lump sum in the call for proposals. All grants signed in this way will use the very same amount predefined. And then the vast majority of topics that are open now will use option 2. In this system, you define the lump sum. In your proposal, you define and justify it. So that's very similar to a traditional actual cost grant, where you also define the amount that you deem correct and necessary to carry out your work. So when it comes to writing a lump sum proposal, the main message is, first of all the technical and scientific aspects are exactly the same as in a traditional actual cost proposal. In particular, you use the very same application form, you have the same way of presenting objectives, methodology, expected outcomes and impacts, all that is exactly the same. And of course you need to cover what each work package will do. What is actually different is that you need to add a detailed budget table with cost estimations. That is the main tool for us to define upfront what the lump sum for your project, once selected, will be. And this is given to you in the form of an Excel file that you can download from the submission system, and it contains information on how to fill it. We look a little bit more on how this works. In fact, the details, I'm not sure if I can use the pointer here. Yeah, the details, I have the link down here on where you find more guidance on how to complete this budget table. In a nutshell, the budget table resolves your cost estimations per beneficiary and per work package along the cost categories that we have in the program. For example, you will resolve the personnel costs by staff member, or rather by staff category, sorry, not by individual, by staff category, by work package and by beneficiary. And this gives sort of more information that is necessary to agree on a lump sum up front. Your approximations, they don't need to be accurate. They are of course understood as estimations that cannot be accurate in the sense of actual costs after they have been incurred. So these estimations need to be reasonable and non-excessive. That is the measuring stick by which we will assess them. They must also be eligible, meeting the eligibility criteria. That means any item that you put there would have been eligible also in an actual cost grant. That's the condition for us to accept it. And of course, they must be in line with the activities that you propose. Another aspect that you really need to pay attention to is the number of work packages and the arrangement of work packages in your proposal, because this is directly linked to the payments and to the cash flow in your project. We'll see later a bit more how this works. Generally speaking, you can subdivide work packages along the reporting periods to achieve their payment by the end of reporting periods. For example, if you have a management work package or a dissemination exploitation work package that takes the whole duration of the project and you want to be paid for these activities at the end of each reporting period, you can split them in 2 or 3 work packages, which then can be paid. But this principle shouldn't be overstretched. You shouldn't endlessly subdivide work packages. The work packages must still be a major subdivision of work in the end. So again, when it comes to the evaluation of your lump sum proposal, a lot is the same as in the traditional system. We use the standard evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. What's different now is that the detailed cost estimation, this budget table that you completed and submitted, that is assessed under the implementation criterion. Experts will then ensure that indeed your cost estimations are reasonable and that they support the activities that you proposed in your proposal. That's the key assessment, and if this is the case, we see in practice that most selected grants actually have few changes and go through indeed as proposed, as we also see it in the actual cost system. But of course, if experts find that certain costs are overestimated, then they will make concrete recommendations. And so in a number of cases, we also see that budgets need to be corrected following the expert recommendation during grant preparation. You will get enough information from the experts on how to make these changes once the evaluation is completed. It goes without saying that if the budget is really flawed, if there are really major overestimations or major mistakes in the budget, then like in any other grant, like in the traditional system, of course, this will lead to a lower score and decrease the chances that your proposal will be selected. This is just an example of the data that we give to experts to help them make this assessment. We focus here on personnel costs because this is by far the most important part of the average budget of a proposal. This gives, we will provide the accepted personnel costs in the past, so it's historical data from Horizon 2020, which will be updated as we get new data in, showing the distribution of accepted personnel costs across all beneficiaries. And the statistical analysis will then allow experts to make a better and more informed decision on what's reasonable and what might be an outlier. We will provide this resolved by country and by type of organization. So what you see here is only the example for Horizon 2020 as a whole, for the whole EU, where you see, for example, that the median accepted personnel cost was €5,000. Coming to grant preparation, again, it's in most aspects exactly the same as usual. We follow the standard process. Of course, you will then use the lump sum model grant agreement, which is linked here. But like in any other grant, we apply the no negotiation principle, meaning that the grant that we sign is really based on the proposal you submitted. We can make certain changes, for example, to correct obvious errors, and if necessary, also correct certain cost items that have been overlooked, that have been detected as wrong or ineligible, but were not detected during the evaluation. In principle, this is still possible to correct those during grant preparation, but this should be the exception. Principally, we want to finalize this evaluation during the evaluation and this assessment so that you already get the clear view when you get your evaluation result letter what the lump sum will be that will be signed in your grant. Then what we include in this grant agreement, and that's different, is the breakdown of lump sum shares. It shows the lump sum for each work package and the lump sum for each beneficiary. That becomes the financial annex. And in principle, once we sign, that's a core principle of lump sum funding. Once we sign this grant with a fixed lump sum agreed during evaluation, then we are not going to question these amounts afterwards. For example, if prices for goods and services change. The only exception would be if there was a fraudulent or a gross negligence in setting up the lump sum. Now, what does this financial schedule look like in the grant agreement that you see here? The budget allocation. What you see, this is what Annex 2 in the grant agreement would look like. You see in the last column on the right-hand side, you see the shares of lump sums per beneficiary. And in the bottom row, you see the shares of lump sums per work package. So you see the lump sum, the cost in a way of each work package and the share assigned to each beneficiary. In the table, you see this resolved by beneficiary and work package. Now, the principle here is that you can use this lump sum in every way you want. You have full flexibility because the way that you use this budget, in which you use this budget, is essentially invisible to us. The only thing that we monitor and that we expect is that the grant is implemented as agreed and as described in the description of the action in Annex 1. But if you want to make changes, if you have an amendment and you want to formally change this financial annex, then of course you need to do an amendment so that it is reflected in the grant agreement. Payments. Lump sum payments follow exactly the same schedule as in any other grant. So you have a pre-financing payment, you have one or more interim payments at the end of each reporting period, and you have a payment of the balance at the very end of the project. The pre-financing has precisely the same function. It is calculated in the same way. It has the same level. So it depends on the number of work packages. And then the coordinator distributes this amount among the consortium as agreed in the consortium agreement, same as always. Now, the interim payments, they are slightly different. Here we work on the basis that we pay the lump sum share for the work packages that you have completed. So at the end of a reporting period, you declare work packages completed. You justify and you explain how they are completed in your intermediate report. And if accepted by the Commission, by the agency, exactly this amount is paid. And this works actually in an automated way. Once the acceptance is there, the financial statement is generated automatically because we agreed upfront on the amount for a completed work package. So at the payment of the balance, the same happens. Any final work packages completed at the end of the project will be paid at that moment if accepted. We have the possibility to make partial payments at that moment in time, not at intermediate reports, but at the end we can, if a work package has not been completed, make a partial payment. And of course, we release the amount for the mutual insurance mechanism, again, like for any other grant. So here you see an example of how the interim reporting and payment works. At the end of the reporting period, I already mentioned, you declare how many and which work packages you have completed. So here in this case, we have a consortium that completed work packages 1 and 3. And the amounts for these work packages are then paid, so you get a payment of 700,000 euro, while work packages 2, 4 and 5 have not been completed or only partially completed. So in this moment they shouldn't be declared normally, and they will be paid and they will be completed and paid later. Of course, in lump sum funding, an important aspect is, a key aspect is the acceptance of work packages as completed, because this determines the payment. Now, the main principle is that we accept work packages when the activities in these work packages have been carried out and when they have been completed. But this is not black and white. This is not an all or nothing, and we can absolutely accept work packages also when at least all essential tasks have been completed, and of course also when you have done equivalent tasks that you have justified, or when you have indeed done, when you have deviated from the normal work program, but you have justified this in your report, and this is accepted. So the level of discretion that we have is the same as in traditional funding. There is no stricter approach to assessing lump sum projects than traditional projects. If you see that your work package cannot be completed as planned, you should make use of the possibility to amend your lump sum project and change it according to the needs that you have, such as making the work package completable, making it feasible to complete it as much as possible. Of course, the amendment has to be accepted for that. Likewise, the deviation that you describe have to be accepted. This is like in any grant, but this is a mechanism that you can use and that you should use to complete as many work packages as possible. If ever a work package is declined by a project officer, you will have the possibility, they will ask your opinion on this, and you will have the possibility to explain why, according to you, it is in fact completed. Now, if this rejection is still upheld, then you will not be paid for that work package at that point in time, but you can, of course, complete it later on up until the end of the project. And at this point in time, it can still be paid in full, of course. And then there is still a possibility, if at the very end of the project you couldn't complete a work package in full, then you can tell us that there were technical reasons, or maybe force majeure as well, as an explanation why this was not possible to complete. You can then report a partially completed work package, and this is then perfectly possible to pay this part of the work package that you have indeed completed, but not the uncompleted part. How does this look like in practice so far? So what we see is that in the lump sum pilot, we've now got around 20% of all the work packages in this pilot have been declared completed so far. And of these 20% that have been declared completed in ongoing projects, we see that the vast majority, 98%, were accepted and paid in full. So basically, in nearly every case, the work package was accepted and paid. And all the other cases are they were handled in a very good way in this lump sum system. So we have two work packages only that were rejected in an intermediate report. Of course, as I explained before, they can be completed later on and be paid later on. Then we have only one work package that was declared partially completed by the beneficiaries, and it was partially paid in line with that declaration. So that was fully consensual. We had also one final report that was rejected. That can happen in any grant. That was a purely technical reason unrelated to lump sum funding. They used the wrong template, so they will have to resubmit the report using the correct template, and they can, of course, be paid afterwards. Finally, we had one lump sum project that was terminated, again, for reasons totally unrelated to lump sum funding, and that was partially implemented at that time, so it was partially paid also in a consensual way as declared. So the summary is basically there is no high financial risks from lump sum funding because you can really expect that your lump sum project is paid, and in the event that there will be the need to do a partial payment, likely there is going to be a good solution. Coming to the ex post controls. In lump sum funding, of course, a lump sum grant can be audited or checked or reviewed at any point during the project or after for the proper implementation of the action of the project. So you can have a technical review. And of course, there will be reviews or checks during the project together with the payments. Likewise, we can check the compliance with all the non-financial obligations in the grant. Like you have a number of examples here, IPR obligations, open science, dissemination, all the non-financial horizontal obligations apply in the very same way and can be checked in the same way. And this is exactly the same as in an actual cost grant. All these checks, of course, can happen also in an actual cost grant in the same way. But what you don't have in a lump sum grant is you don't have financial checks or reviews or audits by the EU services. And okay, this fits in with what you need to remember for keeping records. You need any kind of document that demonstrates that you actually implemented the project as described. So any technical documents, lab books, presentations, conference materials, anything that shows you actually did the work. But what you don't need anymore is anything related to reporting of financial or financial aspects or resources. So no timesheets or payslips or contracts, no invoices, and generally nothing that proves that you incurred actual cost. Maybe I add one word of warning that, of course, while you have no obligation towards the Commission to keep any financial records, you may have in your internal procedures or under national law, you might have obligations to keep such records. And of course, those obligations you need to follow, that is outside and independent of the contract you have for the project. I mentioned that there's more guidance and information available. This is summarized here. In particular, we have a full presentation on how lump sum funding is working. This includes also details on how to complete this budget table. There is the quick guide, which gives you a full overview on the main principles. I mentioned a couple of them already now, but there's more details in this quick guide. And we have here the reference documents, the model grant agreement, and the decision, which is underlying all this lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. I also link you here the 2 studies carried out by the Commission and by the Parliament. Next steps are that we are working on more guidance documents, in particular on a detailed guidance document for applicants and participants. This is near final, but it's still undergoing final legal review. We hope to be able to release this soon. There will be an additional set of slides for experts that are involved in lump sum, evaluating lump sum proposals. This will be in addition to the standard slides that all experts receive for evaluating proposals, because all the other aspects are the same. And then we just released a one-stop shop, I can say, a page where all information on lump sum funding is coming together. The lump sum page on the Funding and Tender portal, Funding and Tenders portal. We have the link here. It's been online since just yesterday, and I'd be happy if you be the first ones to explore this page. Of course, this will develop as we get new information. For Horizon Europe, there's a few improvements over what we did in Horizon 2020. One thing in general is that I've not mentioned here is that we now have an easier way to amend lump sum grants. This is now exactly the same essentially as for any grant. Previously, there was still an obligatory technical review. This is no longer needed, so the amendments work in the same way. We will introduce a higher page limit for lump sum proposals to take account of the fact that you do have, on average, a slightly higher number of work packages. So this will be reflected in a higher page limit, but only from work program 23 onwards. We will provide this dashboard. I showed the example for experts. And then we are also working on an improved budget table that is more user-friendly, eventually also putting this into the electronic submission system. But this is a complex project, will take some time. Anyway, improvements are on the way for this budget table. What happens next is that, I mentioned already, we continue to monitor all these projects and also the newly signed projects under Horizon Europe and make adjustments if necessary, if we see that any of those possible risks that have been identified upfront by stakeholders do materialize. Then we will certainly take action and try and amend and improve. Then the next steps is that we now have 27 lump sum topics for 2022. They have just been released on the Funding and Tenders portal, and the idea is to strongly increase this share of lump sum topics in 2023, so in the next work program to be released. I give you here an overview. We don't need to go through the details. You see there are, for most clusters, a couple of topics that use lump sum funding now, also as a preparation for the more wide use that we intend to start from 2023. So it's cluster 2, cluster 3. We have a few more in cluster 5. The European innovation ecosystems use lump sum funding already. We have it in the Marie Curie actions. In the ERC, there's the POC grants using it, and then also in the Europe Rail joint undertaking. With that, I would like to finish. Thank you for your attention, and be happy to continue the discussion with our panelists and based on your questions. Thank you.
So we are now going into the panel discussion. As I indicated in my introduction, we are actually 5 panelists. 2 of them are here with me in the studio, but we also have 2 joining us from their home place. And maybe we can now, if the technicians in the background can do this, show the whole panel, including the 2 colleagues joining us via Teams. Is this possible? Yes. So, hello and welcome, Ms. Stoppel and Ms. Chavaria. We are very grateful to have you here today. And we will now go into this panel discussion. We will ask you a number of questions, and we look forward to your replies. Before starting this, I repeat again that, of course, the whole audience also can ask questions and send comments. This happens via Slido. You go to www.slido.com, and then you put in the keyword for today, which is lump sum, and then you can put in your questions and remarks. So, but now we start the panel discussions with our 2 external participants, and I hand over to Benedict for asking the first question, please.
Thank you, Peter. So maybe to start and just to give everybody a short overview of who you are and which kind of project you are involved in. Maybe first, Suzanne, could you just briefly told us in which kind of project you are involved? When did the project start? Have you been already through reporting or not?
So my name is Susan Stoppel, and I'm the EU liaison officer at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Tübingen. Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Focused on calls and programs addressing life science and research associated to this. We are beneficiary of 2 lump sum pilots of the call in 2018 in the area of infectious diseases. So the first project we are in is called TT4CL, and it has a volume of around 3.7 million euro in total. And our budget share sums up to 670,000 euros. The project started in 2019, and our research part is the implementation of a clinical trial. We are performing a phase 1 clinical trial study on 38 healthy patients with a medication that treats cutaneous leishmanias. This is an infectious disease prevalent in Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East and South America. We so far could not finalize our first work packages. which was planned to be finalized after 18 months due to reasons out of our control. So one reason is simply COVID, which delayed all the lab work. And the other reason was associated to the UK coordinator and the fact that Brexit came in. The other project, which is VASA, has a volume of about 6.6 million. And our budget share is only 40,000 euros at the Faculty of Medicine. The project started in 2019, and our task in the project is capacity building by training staff members of clinical sites in Africa. So the small budget shows our minor role in this project, and we are only now about to start the training measurements as COVID did not allow traveling to these countries so far. As a result, we could so far not finalize one of our work packages, and while projects went through reporting and payment, we were not part of this process yet.
Thank you very much. So maybe now I will address the same question to Elena. In which project are you involved? What is your role in the project? When did it start? And have you been through reporting already or not?
Hello, good morning. First of all, thank you for the invitation. So my name is Elena Chavarria. I'm project manager and I work in the scientific management area at VHIO in the Vall d'Hebron Institute of Oncology in Barcelona. So VHIO is member of Cancer Core Europe. Cancer Core Europe is an alliance of seven cancer centers in Europe from 7 different countries that combine the scientific research and the patient care. And it was in the framework of Cancer Core Europe that we submitted a proposal to an H2020 lump sum call, and it was selected for funding. So the proposal is Cancer Core Europe DART, and it's a RIA project. VHIO is the coordinator, and I'm the project manager of the proposal. And all Cancer Core Europe centers are participating as beneficiaries. But in addition to the Cancer Core Europe centers, we also have other beneficiaries, and one is in one academic institution, and also 3 different SMEs. So DART stands for Building Data-Rich Clinical Trials, and the main objective of DART is to have more efficient and more effective academic trials in oncology. So we will reach this objective by developing new management tools, by using more efficient clinical trials methodologies and statistical designs, and also incorporating more accurate biomarkers of response. Finally, we will also have a section dedicated to empowering the patients in the research process. So the project started the 1st of February 2021, and in July we will finalize our first reporting period. So we are now preparing our first report with lump sum.
Thank you very much. So after this short introduction, we can have a first round of questions more focusing on the submission and the evaluation of the project. That's also the area where you have more experience because you're also on the early steps of the project. So my first question will be to Suzanne, and I would like to ask you, in comparison to other proposals you may have been involved in, you may have submitted, what kind of differences did you notice when contributing to the writing of these lump sum proposals? And if you would have to advise someone considering to apply for a project where lump sum funding is used, what would be your advice?
So thank you for this question. I think that in great parts of proposal writing, they do not really significantly change. This is especially valid for the sectional excellence and the impact. However, I would summarize 3 major differences in proposal writing. The first is that we, and here I'm speaking as an EU liaison officer, we need to raise awareness at applicants and project partners, and we need to explain to them this financial scheme. It's different in the way of thinking, and it's not applied in national funding schemes. So researchers and applicants need to learn about the new aspects of this instrument. And the second main difference lies in the development of the structure of the work packages. From my point of view, a proposal writing consortium should go much more into the details of the implementation of the project. And this means that the team carefully should consider the wording of deliverables and the necessary interactions of those partners who contribute to the individual deliverable. In addition, the duration of the individual work packages will influence the structure of the work packages as a whole. So while standard applications in actual cost systems would not consider the duration of a work package to be an issue to think about in a lump sum application, some work packages at least should be split into 2 or 3 work packages. And this, because this allows for partially reimbursement of costs if they are, for example, include activities for 2 or more reporting periods. The project management is the standard example, but it also applies to cases of scientific work packages, which have basically the same objectives and similar tasks, but a duration of 3, for example, or 5 years. Also here, a split of work package should be considered. And then the third main difference is the fact that there are more templates in numbers and in complexity to be filled. And on the one hand, I find the Excel template that is part of the application package, that it's very helpful for the calculation of project costs. We even received this template now from coordinators preparing for applications in actual costs applications. But on the other hand, filling the template with its subtable is simply more time consuming. And it needs more explanations to the partners. It needs some time to get familiar with handling the details and changes. And from my point of view, it lacks opinions to explain and justify the budget in more detail right next to the cost items, right within the template. So explanations and justifications of other direct costs, for example, they still need to be completed in table 3.4, which is the normal template in the implementation section of the main proposal. And this is basically an increase in complexity because items in the lump sum template are allocated according to the work packages, and in table 3.4, we are listing then and explaining them per cost item. So in total, it's more effort in proposal writing, and I suggest that it's worth to use this scheme in 2-stage proposals, but I actually would not like to have to take this additional effort in single-stage proposals. So now to the second part of your question, what I would recommend, a few aspects were already mentioned before, but I would have anyone recommend to start early with developing the structure of the work packages, and to look at the work packages from the perspective of what factors and from which partners your tasks depend on. I would recommend to carefully consider what you promise within a deliverable, and also check your deliverable with regard to feasibility and with regard to the delivery time point. So perhaps it makes sense to create 2 deliverables and to allocate them to 2 work packages or to 2 reporting periods. I also recommend start early with preparation of the Gantt chart, because this is another tool in order to understand interactions in the project. And start early with calculation of costs and filling the budget template. And for this, it would also be helpful if there's no delay in providing the template in the call documents. So in the year 2020, there was quite a remarkable delay in providing this Excel file. So it would be really helpful if this is available from the beginning on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Just to to answer on your last point, so now we have this template that is published on the funding and tenders portal. So everybody who is interested could just go to the reference document section and find it and have a look at it. So still talking about submission and evaluation, now a question for Elena, also maybe from your perspective as a coordinator of a lump sum project. Do you think that there is a difference in the approach on how the consortium is structured and in the way you select the partners that would be part of your consortium when you're in the framework of a lump sum project?
So for the second part of the question, the selection procedures of consortium partners, for our end, there was no different at all. So first of all, because we are CancerCo Europe, so 7 out of the 11 members of the consortium are used to work together. But for the other 4 partners in the consortium, the 1 academic and the 3 SMEs, there was no difference at all. No difference because partners have to report the completed task, and this is the important aspect for us. So we want work packages completed, we want the milestones reached and deliverables submitted independently of how the budget has been used. So also because the budget, as Susanna was explaining at the beginning, is first coherent with the task and is really detailed, and this is really, really helpful during the management of the proposal for the monitoring and the control. Then regarding the different approach of how the consortium is structured, we have one main difference, that is the management structure. This is because in our project we have 21 work packages. And why we have 21 work packages? This is because this allows us to have a more sustainable project from a financial point of view. It was also mentioned before, but in the original design, we have few work packages, but we identified that most of these work packages, all the work packages, started in MON 1 and finalized in MON 48. That was the end of the project. So we have to redesign the original structure for different reasons. So first of all, in some work packages, we have different sub-work packages with different leaders. For example, the work package for the creation of tools. So we have in one work package the creation of 3 different tools, tool number 1, 2, and 3. Each tool with a different leader, with different timelines, with different objectives, milestones, deliverables, etc. So we decide to split this work package in 3, 1 for each tool, 1 for the development of each tool. So we realized that if we created 3 work packages instead of 1, if one tool is delayed and the other 2 are completed on time, these 2 tools could receive the payment at the end of the reporting period. So we started to split some work packages, taking into account this consideration. Also because other work packages that we split were because, for example, for the biomarkers work package, we identified different sub-projects there. So we have on one hand the analysis of the established technologies, and on the other one, the discovery part, that is the analysis of the emerging technologies. So we see that we can do 2 different work packages here too. And also, as it has been explained before, for example, for project management, we have 3 different work packages, 1 for each reporting period. So during this process for us was really helpful to see other lump sum projects, Gantt charts and pair diagrams, because it helped us a lot to redesign our structure and to adapt it to the lump sum. So at the end, we have a more sustainable project from a financial point of view, but we have 21 work packages to manage and coordinate with 21 different work package leaders. So here is the main difference. We decided to create working areas. So we created 5 working areas with a working area leader, and this leader coordinates and supervises the work of the working area. So in the steering committee, we only have the work area leaders and not the work package leader. So this is the main difference. We have added this new lawyer in the management structure. So we have in the steering committee the work area leaders and not the 21 work package leaders.
Thank you very much, Elena. I think your answer is really the perfect transition to my second round of questions, where we will focus a bit more on the project management and maybe the first first hints you could have on reporting and payments. So first question to Suzanne, from your experience, what would you say about the management and the administration of the projects you are involved? Do you think that the fact that we abolish the reporting of actual costs make it easier to manage those projects in comparison to standard actual cost projects you may be involved?
Of course, there are really a lot of things that are easier, and in total, I really hope that finally the entire process will be easier. What I can say right now is that in each case, financial reporting will be less time-consuming and less complex, and especially the abolition of time recording and personal cost calculation makes a huge difference in terms of administrative resources. And of course, financial reporting will be much less affected by errors, that's for sure. We already applied unit cost clinical trials. I mean, the clinical trial unit costs that were introduced in H2020 project as a pre-pilot to the lump sum funding scheme. So therefore, we actually have a bit of experience in reporting such projects, and we are coordinating two of these projects using unit costs clinical trials. It's without saying, it's great. It greatly facilitates financial reporting. And I even would say that these trials are not feasible because or that would have not been feasible without this unit cost option. Now, with regard to TT4CL, I always hear from the researchers involved how extremely pleased they are about the fact that they do not have to write timesheets. So that's obviously something which is researchers really helps them. We suppose that it will also be easier to deal with internally invoiced costs, for example, animal housing. Here, our problem is that we apply a cost allocation scheme that might not fully fulfill all complex audit requirements. So besides, our calculation is based on actual costs and it does not contain ineligible costs. But in H2020, we never charged this cost to projects. And I think that for the lump sum projects, we would now be able to calculate these costs in the project costs. So nevertheless, there's also a different side of the medal, and this is the risk consideration. And at the moment, we still lack of sufficient experience to realistically know about the financial risks that might occur during such projects, unless they are really finalized. As we all know, project plan and project implementation is never the same. There are always differences. We are dealing with researchers. And with research, there are always obstacles. There is always something to change and to adjust. And as long as there are mitigation strategies available, I suppose consortium and the EU administration will be able to handle these through amendments. That's not what really makes me afraid. However, we still lack of experience how the EU administration will deal with work packages that are incomplete. I mean, with practical experience, we lack of that. We lack of experience how to handle bankruptcy, for example, of an enterprise during project implementation. We lack experience how the EU administration will deal with deliverables of minor or different quality. So nevertheless, I'm pleased to hear that there will be procedures established for explanations and justifications and interactions before budgets will be cut. But for now, we must trust that solutions will be developed and that they do not impose additional financial risks on us. So if it would come to an increase of financial risk of the lump sum pilots or lump sum projects, I think this would really make the problem less easier, or will make the project less easier in implementation. So therefore, it's not a final statement I can make at the moment.
Thank you very much. And to Elena, a question a bit similar. Do you think that the fact that your project use lump sum is facilitating the internal management of your project? You already introduced it a bit earlier. And now that you're preparing the first reporting, do you have already some impressions or some feedback that you could communicate to us?
So yes, I think that the answer is yes. So I think that also if you are a beneficiary, it is much easier because the financial tasks are reduced. But from a coordinator point of view, I think that is also easiest but we have identified new aspects that we have to take into account. So it's easiest, but we have new tasks to do with lump sum project. The main one is that in other European projects, funds are redistributed automatically during the financial report. For example, in one work package, you have to pilot a tool. So in the proposal, you estimate 3 countries for piloting this tool, and you allocate 2 person months per country, 2 per country 1, 2 per country 2, and 2 person months for country 3. So in the financial report, in other European projects, the coordinator only have to check that the person months that are declared in the report are in line with the reality, so are consistent with the task done and with the task that you are justifying in the scientific report. So you have to check that they are declaring the real person months. So for example, in this case, maybe you allocate 2 person months per country, but then there is a country that cannot implement this tool. Maybe it's a remote informed consent, and they cannot implement it for their legal legislation, for their local legislation. There is one country that can do it for the 2 person months initially allocated, but there is another country that needs 3 person months because they have a lot of paperwork. So in other European projects, you only have to check that this is real in the financial report and that they are declaring more or less 1, 2, and 3 person months and not 2, 2, 2 as planned. So now with the lump sum, this automatic redistribution of the budget is not happening. So we have decided that we have to redistribute the budget before the reports, taking into account the real work done. So actually for us, this is an advantage because I feel more comfortable maybe having a meeting reports. And actually, we have realized that it's working the other way around. So it's the work package that internally discuss the redistribution of the budget, taking into account the real work that maybe is different or not from the proposal, and they contact us and request this budget modification. So if it is coherent and if all the members involved agree on the redistribution, we include it in our amendment log to include it in the next amendment. So this is happening now, and this is happening also because, as I said before, we have this detailed breakdown of the costs in the budget. So I agree that during the proposal, it was a lot of work. Imagine our project, for example, we have 11 partners and 21 different work packages. So if you have to create a table per work package per partner, we end up with more than 200 tables to complete. But now it's really easy to monitor and control the project because we have all the details in this Excel. So yes, I think that with the lump sum, it will be easiest to manage the financial coordination of the project. And also because in other projects, the coordinator needs to approve the financial statements, and you have to review some common mistakes, maybe in the calculation of the person months, or maybe sometimes the costs were allocated not in the correct work package. So you have to review all these financial statements, and now the financial statement will be automatically generated. The only thing that we have to do is to agree on a common, to agree on the final budget that we have and amended, taking into account the reality.
For these really informative answers. And I guess now we can continue with the questions from the audience.
Indeed, we will now look into the questions from the overall audience that arrived to us via Slido. Okay, so we start with the Slido questions. As I said, please vote on questions that you also would like to ask, and we now go through them in the order of number of likes. I would ask our two external panelists, please stay with us, because it's very likely that some of the questions will also be asked to you. Okay, we start with number 1. If a coordinator suspects a partner is doing the bare minimum and deliberately underspending, how can he/she respond? Hard to prove this without a cost statement. Should we, from our side, try to give a first reply, and then we hand over to our two external panelists, because you might have experience on this practically. Ulrich, do you want to start?
Yeah, indeed, I don't have practical experience with that either, but my first reaction would be, how is that different from an actual cost system? Because the cost statement in itself doesn't prove very much. So an underperforming partner can, of course, also still always issue a cost statement. So that is, for me, a general case of disagreement inside the consortium. So the consortium needs to have in the consortium agreement mechanisms to deal with partners, with underperforming or non-performing partners. This is obviously not part of the grant agreement that you sign with the Commission.
Yes, and maybe we can give the floor to our two project participants. I don't know. Elena, do you want to give it a start? How do you do this in practice? I guess you have experience handling underperforming participants. We cannot hear you. Did you?
Declare more effort, the effort that you consider. Sorry, there is some echo. The effort that you consider that they are also doing. And also, as I said before, the budget that you create during the proposal is really useful, and you can amend it if you want. So before the reporting period, you can sit with all the people involved in our package and agree on the real budget for this work package, taking into account the tasks done. So if more than one partner is involved, it is easy to compare. So you have done this, and you have only done this. So you can redistribute the budget. And I think that having this detailed budget will help you to do this.
Susanna, do you want to complement maybe?
I think I cannot really add a lot here, because my first impression is also that the problem with underperforming partners exists independently of the lump sum pilot. Probably in lump sum pilots, the focus will be more on the performance of a partner than on its costs. And the focus must be, if a partner does not perform properly, then the consortium or the coordinator should be in contact and solve the problem, either by redistribution of parts of funds and activities, or by getting the partner to the proper work. So that's basically what I can add here.
Thank you very much. And we turn to the next question. So, next question. If a task costs less than planned, there is no incentive to dedicate unspent funding to enrich other project tasks. Isn't it a problem? Ulrich, do you want to start?
Yes, again, I don't see this as a problem. Of course, and I think we heard also from the panelists, you will typically have changes in how the project is finally carried out. You will not be 100% in line with the initial planning, and that is also true for the budget. Lump sum funding is all about that you can use the budget in the best way to complete your project. We don't see how it is spent. Of course, a result of any project is, the actual implementation of any project will bring with it that some parts will cost more and other parts will cost less, and this should compensate each other. So we cannot pre-define how this will work. You have all the flexibility, and of course, if one part costs less, you should use this to pay for the cost that may be higher in another part. There is no, I don't understand that. Well, there is of course the incentive that the whole project has to be delivered in the end. So this is why you have to use the fund for the parts that use more money from the parts that use less money. But there's no way to prescribe this upfront.
Yes, and maybe to add, similarly to the question before on underperforming partners, the way to handle this, you should agree, of course, in the consortium via your consortium agreement. So that is possibly also an important part to agree upfront with all the partners on how you handle such situations, and in both directions, of course. What happens if it costs more in one case, and what happens if in fact it costs less? Our two external panelists, can you just indicate whether you want to contribute to this by maybe raising your hand? Yes, please, Elena.
Yes, so I think that this happens also in other projects with without the lump sum. So what you do in other projects? So as I said, it is automatically done in the budget because you declare more cost in one work package and less cost in another work package. And then you justify this in the report. So you justify this deviation. So in lump sum projects, as I said, we are now going to do our first report, but we will do it the same way, without the redistribution in the budget, because we will justify this deviation in the report, and we will see if the European Commission accepts it or not. But I think that is the same procedure that in other projects. So you justify this deviation, you declare it in the report, and then in previous projects, in not lump sum projects, the budget is redistributed automatically with the financial statement. Here, maybe you can include it in the next budget amendment or not.
Okay, so let's turn to the next question, please. Can you make examples how to split and rename long work packages, such as work package 1 management, work package 2 management, in shorter reporting periods? That is maybe again a question directly to our two external panelists, because you know how to do this.
Perhaps I can respond.
Thank you. Thank you.
Briefly.
Yes.
I saw some proposals where they simply say management 1, management 2, work package 1, management 1, management 2, and management 3, or period 1, period 2, period 3. So it's not really so important how you give the title. It's more important that you decide how you split it, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Elena, you want to compliment?
Yes, I think I totally agree with Suzanne. For example, in our case, we have project management for reporting period 1, for reporting period 2, and for reporting period 3. But also Suzanne was saying before, during her discussion, that not only the management can be split, but also other work packages, also scientific work packages. And maybe it's not only for the time, but for the tasks that are done in the work package, that can be an independent work package, always taking into account that it has to be a work package and not a simply task. So maybe you can split, as I said in my example, we had a work package for development of tools. So maybe you can split 3 work packages, 1 for each tool, of the different phases of the work package.
Okay, thank you. We go to the next question. Next one, the lump sum. Oh no, if a partner leaves the project earlier, how can the value of their contribution be calculated without a financial statement, especially if there is disagreement? Ulrich or Benedict, who wants to start?
I can give it a
Okay,
try.
please.
Now, in a leaving partner, first of all, technically, at the time when the partner leaves the consortium, the payment that there is no payment. We will take into account all the work packages that have been declared and completed up until this point in time. And then, of course, the partner may leave in the middle of a reporting period and may have been involved in a work package that is not yet complete at this moment. This work package can then be declared later at the normal reporting period by the rest of the consortium. If accepted, it will be paid then, and the consortium can at that moment reimburse the partner who left earlier. That is the mechanism that we will apply. There is not a decision on the partial completion of a work package at the time when the partner leaves. So that's how it works, and how much this would actually be, and what the contribution of that partner to the work package actually is indeed something for the consortium to agree. Again, I wonder if you really have a so much easier way to solve it if this partner who leaves gives you a cost statement, because that again is dictated by the partner who leaves. So if there's disagreement, I'm not sure how the cost statement of that partner is helping to solve the disagreement. In the end, the consortium need to agree what a just split would look like in both cases.
Yes, and I think also these kinds of conflicts, potential conflicts, would also be subject to stipulations in your consortium agreement. So how do you handle all these kind of conflicts? But that's more or less also the same in real cost grants. Colleagues from outside, if you want to intervene, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will go to the next question. Doesn't seem to be the case, so we go to the next question. The lump sum will necessarily result in more work packages. How does this align with advice by the Commission for Horizon Europe about fewer work packages and fewer deliverables? Maybe this time, Benedict, you start.
I can start with this one. So first, on the first part of the question, that the lump sum will necessarily result in more work packages, it is true that we observe that in our lump sum project there is a tendency to have more work packages for the reasons we discussed already. That's not systematic. It can also happen that in a proposal, the proposal is for a short duration of time, or the consortium assumes that they will not have any problem with the cash flow, and here the distribution of the work packages will remain standard. Then regarding the recommendations, this is true that now in, for example, the online manual, we have a sentence saying that the number of work packages should be limited to, I don't remember whether was it 5 or 10. This is, of course, a general rule that is valid for all programs that are using the all funding program of the Commission, and we know that there are exceptions and that should be adapted to the reality of your project. So, of course, if you are in the framework of a lump sum project and that you see it makes more sense for your own work plan to have more work packages, that is totally acceptable and possible to split them, for example, along the reporting periods. And that's also something the experts that will be in charge of the evaluation of your project are aware of. We are briefing the experts, and during this briefing, we explain them why lump sum project might have more work packages. We explain them that the payment are done upon completion of the activities of the work package, and they are aware that they could perfectly see proposals with this split work packages. So that's also something that is completely perceived as natural for the experts.
Thank you. Colleagues from outside, do you want to raise your hand and compliment? Yes, Elena, please.
Yes, so it is true, for example, that in our project, we create a lot of work packages. We redesign the work packages and create a lot more for make it more sustainable from a financial point of view. But we didn't know that in lump sum projects, the pre-financing is higher than in other projects. So in our case, we almost receive 50% of the total budget in the pre-financing. So it also facilitates the financial management of the project if you have a big refinancing and you have to take this into account. And I know that in other lump sum projects from other institutions, they have received even more in the pre-financing. So there is no problem. You can do more work packages or less, but take into account that you will have a high pre-financing.
Pre-financing, because that was a special situation, I think, for that project in which you are involved. Ulrich, please.
No, I mean, generally speaking, the pre-financing and the rules applying to pre-financing are exactly the same. So there's no special rule for lump sum funding. It can happen for budgetary reasons that between the years there are differences, but this is nothing to do completely independent of lump sum funding.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Will the reporting periods be fixed in the proposal phase, since this might affect design and duration of work packages? This is an easy one. Who wants to start?
Well, the reporting periods are not per se fixed in the proposal phase because they are going to be fixed in the grant agreement. But you already know, depending on the duration of the project, what is the standard schedule. So you can quite easily divide, like typically make a work package end after 18 months, which is the standard duration of a reporting period. So you can easily align your work packages to this future design of your project.
Yes, and maybe just to add, we have standard recommendations for the length of reporting periods in projects of different durations, and most proposals align with these standards. And then in 99.9% of the cases, the reporting periods as suggested in the proposal are accepted and become part of the grant agreement. So indeed, then the simple question, a reply to the question is yes, they are defined in the proposal in practice. Okay, next question, please. If so many errors are made in reporting, how can you avoid the same errors being made in the budget calculation in the proposal? Do you want to give it a go, Ulrich?
Well, in the lump sum approach, and this is part of the financial regulation of the European Union, lump sums are a perfectly acceptable means to give out funding, and the principle here is that we work with estimations. Of course, we can check, as we can check ex post, we can also check at ex ante if these costs are eligible, if the cost categories are eligible. And the accuracy of these costs is as such not in the same way verifiable as you could with an incurred cost, but what we can check is that these costs are reasonable and that the package overall is a reasonable package allowing you to complete the project, but also not overfunding or overspending this project. So the mechanism of lump sum funding is really an established mechanism that we introduced a couple of years ago and that we intend to use more in parallel with the traditional real cost system. So we don't see any reason of higher errors there because we have an upfront agreement. That's part of the principle. And if this agreement, let's say, followed due diligence, we did a proper evaluation, you declared these costs or you made these estimations in sort of the best possible way, then this is not going to be questioned and you can be nearly certain that this is the amount that you will be paid in the end.
And we can maybe add that in the lump sum funding, there are simply some sources of error that will not exist we remember from the introduction that the bulk of the costs are personnel costs, and also the bulk of the errors in real cost funding are in the personnel costs. And for instance, one reason for detecting errors is that there are no timesheets, or the sheets are not properly according to the standards. So the work was done, the costs were incurred, but you have missed to do some documentation. This source of error will simply disappear in the lump sum funding, and the same applies to some other examples. Next question, maybe. You say budget transfers between partners are possible, but isn't it a problem that no one will want to give up unspent funding they can do what they like with? It's similar to the earlier questions we had already. Yes, please, Ulrich, start.
There isn't. That's why I say you have an envelope in lump sum funding, and that is the total lump sum. The consortium has a responsibility to deliver the project for that amount. Of course, there needs to be an agreement inside the consortium how this lump sum is divided. In principle, you have the financial annex which defines how this lump sum is divided, but of course it can be amended according to your needs. If you never amend it and the consortium agrees on the lump sum distribution, you also don't need to amend it, because the Commission doesn't need to know how the lump sum is split in the end between the consortium members. The Commission will only want to know that you implemented the project. So this all comes down to the consortium agreeing among themselves how to use the lump sum to carry out the project. And within this, you have all the possible flexibility that you might want. Now, if you want in the consortium to have that black on white in your grant agreement, that is the case when you need to do an amendment and change formally in the grant agreement the lump sum share distribution.
Maybe to bring in again the practical experience, maybe our two external participants, panelists, can contribute to this kind of question, not only that particular question. So how do you handle conflict resolution, arbitration in your consortia by the way of agreeing in a consortium agreement or whatever other means you have? Who wants to start? Yes, please, Susanne.
I would say I understand the questions a bit better now. I understand that in a lump sum project, it's not so obvious if a partner, if he provides all deliverables, if everything is fine, and perhaps he had used less money that he had applied for. This is a situation you will not recognize as a coordinator so easily compared to the actual cost projects. I think this is one of the simplifications we have to live with, that in that case, if a partner really fulfills all his obligations, tasks are perfect, and he used less money, then it's his advantage, and it's something, that stays with the partner. Otherwise, I think conflicts only arise if tasks are not completely fulfilled, or if there's any dissatisfaction or disagreement, perhaps also in how the description of the tasks is to be understood. And then those things should be cleared up, and it's very individual in consortia. Of course, the consortium agreement has procedures to discuss these things, but most time the entire partners, they like to have the project brought to a positive end, and my experience is that everyone does in the end his best to bring the project to the good end, and normally It's sometimes personal interaction that helps in the end find compromises to solve the problem. So that's also a process that's not really different in and does not depend on the funding scheme. That's simply business as usual, I would say.
Thank you. So we go to the next question, please. Auditors won't ask for timesheets, etc. The very simple reply is yes, they will not. And I think it was clearly spelled out on one of the slides that Ulrich presented, but maybe you emphasize again, Ulrich. What is needed and what is not requested by auditors?
Well, in any, there will be no financial audits in the way that you know them from traditional real cost projects, simply because the grant agreement doesn't oblige you to keep any of these records for the purpose of this grant. Therefore, you can never have a financial audit in the way that you know it. And obviously, nobody in the Commission can ask you for any timesheets or any financial records of that project. I only pointed out that you might have internal processes or you might have national rules or local rules that you still need to comply with. That is a different issue, nothing to do with the contract that you have with the European Commission or the executive agency. For this purpose, for the purpose of the grant, you don't. You only need to keep the technical documentation, and I emphasize this is the same technical documentation that you also need to keep for any project. Because also in any project, of course, you must be able to demonstrate that the work was done. I remind here again that the financial aspect in a real cost grant shouldn't be overestimated. It shouldn't. It's the second step. The first step in an actual cost grant is also that we check and that you must demonstrate that you did the work. Once that is established, your costs become eligible, and if they meet the financial eligibility criteria. But the first and the most important criterion for all grants is that the work was done, and in that sense, lump sum and actual cost grants are exactly the same. The only difference is that in a lump sum situation, the next step is that automatically we make the payment based on the pre-agreed schedule. In the actual cost system, in contrast, the result is that you make a financial claim and you have to have all the necessary documentation that these costs were actually incurred, which can then be accepted and reimbursed.
Okay, next question, please. What about higher prices in the following years? Inflation, is this risk transferred to beneficiaries with lump sum? Benedikt, do you want to start?
Well, I don't see really that the question of the inflation has different impact in actual cost grant and in lump sum grants, because if you're in the framework of an actual cost grant, you fix a max grant amount in your grant and you will be paid at the max, this maximum grant amount. That's the same with a lump sum. The amount of the lump sum is your maximum grant amount, and you will not be paid more than this maximum grant amount. So the risk of inflation is equally present in both type of funding scheme, I would say.
Ulrich, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, just to add that, just to emphasize again, this is actually a problem that we are aware of, but it applies to every EU grant, not only to the research grants, but to every grant, because the principle is that in whatever grant is signed, you have a certain amount specified, and that amount typically cannot be increased after grant signature. This is the same for lump sum grants, this is the same for actual cost grants, and it's also the same in any other EU program. So we are aware that inflation is particularly high right now, and this could maybe be addressed at a much higher level, but really it is unrelated to lump sum funding, this issue.
Okay, next question, please. Which calls will use the lump sum financial system? All calls after a certain date or just a subset to be set in the work program? Ulrich, you showed it for 22, but maybe you can be broader.
No, this is a very easy one to answer. Indeed, this will be a subset. We will use both systems in parallel. You will have calls that will use the traditional actual cost system, and you will have calls that will use the lump sum system. Which one is used will be obvious from the topic description published in the Funding and Tenders portal. The idea is that we now have a first wave of lump sum topics in Horizon Europe. I showed the table in the presentation of 27 topics, and then we will develop this further. So we will see more in 23, and we expect sort of a growth curve of lump sum projects. We don't exactly know how far this will go, and yeah, as for many aspects in lump sum funding, this will depend on how the funding is, on how this is perceived, if indeed the positive feedback remains positive, and what the needs are. So it's not yet clear where this journey will lead us, but we will increase step by step, and you will see which funding scheme applies in every individual topic.
Thank you. I should make a remark concerning the timing. So we unfortunately started 20 minutes later. We would, as the panel here, also extend it by 20 minutes. Would our external participants also have 20 minutes more to stay with us? Just say yes or no, or give us a hand sign. Okay, maybe. That was the body language for maybe from Elena, I think. Okay, but then if you have to leave soon, thank you very much already for all your participation, and we hope we stay in contact. And thanks for all the valuable input and the good replies to the questions. Okay, but we will continue for 20 minutes and try to reply more questions. So let's go to the next question, please. The workload shifts from reporting to proposal level in comparison to actual cost grants. Is this really fair, having in mind the low success rates? Yes, please, Ulrich.
Well, I saw, of course, the response from Susanne that indeed there is more work in the proposal writing for lump sums. There are also advantages in planning, we heard, and even some actual cost grants apparently use the table now. Now, the budget table is, in essence, the only additional thing that you need in a lump sum proposal. And I would hold that the details that you need to fill in are actually the details that you need to properly plan any budget. The lesser resolution of budget figures in an actual cost grant, that doesn't mean that you need to plan carefully your project. These more high-level figures, they don't come out of thin air. They must be the result of your careful planning. And this is, in other words, information that we don't ask in a traditional project, but that you still need. And therefore, we hold that the additional effort of actually submitting this detail shouldn't be excessive. Now, of course, we will try to, where possible, use lump sum funding preferentially in topics that work with a two-stage evaluation. As Susanne recommended, this is something that we will try too. Indeed, we agree. But there will certainly also be one-stage topics using lump sums, in particular also topics that, for example, expect a higher success rate, because that's not the same. Success rates is not the same in all calls and in all parts of the program. So this aspect will be taken into account. But I would stress that, in our view, the additional work is not excessive at proposal stage.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Will the average personnel cost data per country be available? Yes, this refers to the nice slide that Ulrich has shown with this histogram of personnel costs in the EU. Will we make this available publicly?
I mean, this has not yet been finally decided, to be honest. It will certainly be available to the experts. So it is part of the evaluation process. We will make it available to the experts. Whether it will be public information, that remains to be decided. We are in contact also with our colleagues from the Central Commission services. That is to be seen, because of course, we don't want this information to influence the way that you budget lump sum projects. But that's sort of, I have a personal opinion on this, but this isn't really relevant. So there will be a decision on whether to make it available or not when the time comes. The tool will hopefully be available for experts in the second half of this year.
Okay, next question. With lump sum funding, you are forced to make very specific predictions how you will spend the money. I fear missing flexibility when implementing, for instance, area. I think it's exactly the opposite, but maybe Benedikt, you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, this is what I was going to say. In lump sum, you have a lot of flexibility because once you have this budget table where we define the lump sum shares associated to each work package and each beneficiary, you are completely free to use these shares as you see fit for implementing your activities. And if you want to transfer budget to another partner, because that's also something that can happen, and this is what our panelist described also earlier, you also are able to make an amendment for this budget transfer to justify why would you need this budget transfer, and your amendment will, if the justification are making sense, this is likely that this amendment will be accepted by the Commission services. So I would say that you have complete flexibility to implement your budget, your project with the budget that is allocated to you, with this maximum grant amount that is allocated to you in the grant agreement. And as Ulrich also said a bit earlier, we simplified the way to make amendments under Horizon Europe. So now the process for submitting an amendment in a lump sum grant is exactly the same as other grants, and there is no more additional request or administrative procedure in there.
Yes, maybe to complement this, coming back to the budget table that will be part of the grant agreement. So what is of interest to us, the funder, is the breakdown of the lump sums into the work packages. For our purposes, we could stop there. We have no own interest in seeing the further breakdown per work package and per beneficiary. So the fact that this table is also broken down per beneficiary has only the reason to protect the beneficiaries, because it defines the maximum financial liability of each partner. So like in real cost grants, you are only liable to a maximum for your own share. That's the only reason of the breakdown per beneficiary, which also means in consequence that if in fact you redistribute the money that you receive completely differently between the beneficiaries, it's not, we as the funder are not interested in it. So you will ask, or you might ask for an amendment for this only if you want to make clear that the, so to say, the shares in the financial liability between the beneficiaries have changed, and that this must be documented and fixed. But if you can live without this security safety belt, you are absolutely free to distribute the money that you receive between your beneficiaries. Okay, next question. Will it not be more appropriate to limit the length rather than the number of deliverables to minimize the admin? Recommendation maximum 15 deliverables. Yes, please start. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the question to limit the length of deliverables. I think the general recommendation to limit work packages and deliverables comes from the experience that some projects had a vast amount of deliverables in the order of hundreds maybe, making deliverables non-meaningful. Of course, a deliverable should also be a meaningful part of the project, but in lumps, and they have exactly the same function in lump sum funding as they have in actual cost funding. That's a means to report the progress of the project, but it is not coupled to payments. Payments are coupled. The reason is also that deliverables do not cover the entire activities of the project. So in a project, you may very well have activities that do not lead to a deliverable as such. While, of course, the entirety of the work in your grant will be in one work package or another. So this is why we use work packages to trigger. And again, the recommendation to limit the total number of those work packages and deliverables is a general consideration unrelated to lump sum funding.
Yes, maybe on that question, the one or the other external panelist wants to come in. If this is the case, please raise your hand. No? Ah, yes. Elena, please. Yes, please. Please go ahead. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yes, so in our case, for example, as I said, we have a lot of work packages. We have 21, but they are quite small. So we only have 1 or 2 deliverables per work package. And we also have these working areas centralizing the work of different work packages. So for us, it's not a problem at the end to manage and coordinate all the lump sum project.
Okay. Let's turn to the next question. We still have a few minutes left. Will personnel costs higher than the country average be accepted? Some organizations do have higher personnel costs. Benedict.
Well, that's the principle of this dashboard. That's average, and we will display like the median values. And of course, experts probably will know by themselves, but also will be briefed to understand that this is not an absolute value, and that they have to take it as an average, as some advice for them to evaluate. So of course, they will know that some organizations have higher personnel costs, some have lower, and if you have in your proposal something that is particularly high or different than what could be expected, you could also justify it somewhere in your proposal and explain why you have budgeted such a cost in your proposal. That's what could be the approach to adopt there.
And then we should maybe mention that what Ulrich has shown in his slide was not one average. It was even the median, but it was not only the median, it was a whole histogram where you can see the distribution of personnel costs in a country, and we will further break this down by organization type so that the experts have, if they don't know it yet from their own experience, an impression of what the span of reasonable personnel costs in a given country for a different type of organizations is. So we will not go for a strict average and say only the average is accepted. That is absolutely clear. Okay, next question, please. In grant agreement, Article 5.5 says budget flexibility does not apply, but you said budget is full flexible. Can you clarify? Ulrich, can you?
Yeah, I think the meaning here is that it doesn't apply because we don't see your budget execution. And therefore, you have, if you like, unlimited budget flexibility. Budget flexibility in the sense of budget flexibility in an actual cost grant doesn't apply because there is no budget monitoring on our side. That would actually be part of budget flexibility in a traditional grant. So the article that you have there, it doesn't apply because there is no budget monitoring. It doesn't mean that you don't have budget flexibility. It means, in fact, the opposite. I see this would probably have to be clarified also maybe later on somewhere else. This is maybe a formulation that can be misleading. But it's really vis-a-vis the article that you have in the actual cost grant agreement that regulates budget flexibility in an actual cost grant. And it doesn't apply because you have no financial aspects in your grant and no financial monitoring in the sense of the actual cost grant.
Yes, I think we take note for the annotations to this grant agreement article to clarify what is meant with does not apply. Next question, please. Do certificates on financial statements, CFS, apply to lump sum projects? The simple reply is no. I don't think we have to go more into details.
No, you don't need them.
Yeah. How should transversal work packages, management, dissemination, and exploitation be described in the proposal? Described 3 times, described once, and then referred to the first description. Yes, please go.
Generally speaking, both is possible, but indeed, I would encourage you to go for the second option. You describe it once, in particular for management and dissemination exploitation, when you can expect that this will be the same throughout the project. So you could indeed very well do, as suggested, have a work package that describes it, and then insert your second and third split with a reference to the first description without repeating the same text.
Okay, next question. Will you be fine with projects that now have 20 work packages, or will we get penalized with remarks such as complex structure? Maybe I start with the reply myself. So first, we have topics, either real cost reimbursement or lump sums. That means with your proposal, you compete with other lump sum proposals having exactly the same issue. Second, we have publicly announced in such kind of webinars, also in our guidance document in the quick guide on lump sums, that indeed we see that in lump sum proposals there is a need to have a somewhat higher number of work packages. Third, we will of course brief the experts accordingly. I hope this replies to the question that you should not be concerned. Of course, the general advice applies, that was also on one of Ulrich's slides, that a single task or a very tiny activity should not be a work package. So it should still stay reasonable, and it should be major chunks of the work that you put into work packages. Next question, please. How does the partners are incentivized to save money. For instance, no travel to meetings, minimal contributions to work packages like LCA with no direct benefit for them. Isn't this a problem? Ulrich, I think you had this question earlier.
Yeah, it sounds, I don't think that partners are not incentivized to spend much or little money. Partners should be incentivized to spend the money that is needed to do the tasks. If, I think this refers for me to an earlier question, if all tasks have been completed without using all the money assigned to me, that is a luxury problem. Of course, if that's in part for one partner or for one work package, the same as for the whole project as a whole, if you manage to deliver the entire project for less than the lump sum, indeed, congratulations. In that case, that is indeed benefiting the consortium, benefiting you. We don't think this is going to happen very often, because the upfront assessment will make sure that what you get is reasonable. In essence, we could also say the envelope that you get, the lump sum, which is the maximum grant amount, will basically not be different whether you have applied under a traditional actual cost scheme or under a lump sum scheme. What the amount signed in the end, you make the choice in the proposal in the first place. You go through the same type of evaluation. In the end, the amount signed, the maximum amount signed in the grant agreement will be essentially the same, and you have to operate in both schemes within this maximum.
Maybe this question would also deserve replies from our practitioners. So do you observe such kind of behavior in your ongoing lump sum grants? Who wants to start? Yes, please go ahead.
Can I start?
Yes, please. Yes.
I must say that the both of our lump sum projects faced major budget cuts during project negotiations. So in the end, they started with a budget that was almost already very tight at the beginning. now everyone sees that the projects last longer. They have to handle certain hurdles and obstacles. They have to reorganize some work packages, for example. We will probably have to increase the patients we recruit from 30 to 40. So in the end, we will not have any cent left. We will have to include own resources in order to reach the goals of the project. And this is something which I can see in most of our projects, that the money is too short to perform all the tasks that were promised. And it happens very often that we have to use own resources.
So if I can add just general final remarks, please. I'm sorry, but I have to leave soon. So I only want to highlight that for us, lump sum is a big improvement. We are really happy working with lump sum. We feel comfortable, and we feel the endorsement from the European Commission when we have doubts and things. So my advice for future applicants is don't not be afraid and go on, because you will see that lump sum facilitates the financial management. And another advice is, for us was really useful to see the organization of other project lump sums. So maybe you can go to the web pages and see the Gantt charts and the pair diagrams. That this facilitate our work during the proposal, and maybe, I don't know, your national contact point can provide you the websites of other lump sum projects.
Thank you very much. So I'm afraid, as interesting as the discussion is, we have now come to an end. I will keep the wrap up very short. Thanks again to everybody, the panelists who joined us from outside, my colleagues here, but also the many people who visited us and viewed our workshop here and asked many interesting questions. I hope we could, at least in some aspects, contribute to clarifying further issues. I should also mention that this meeting is recorded, so it is available for viewing afterwards. So colleagues, please inform your networks about the existence of this webinar, and anybody who is interested or planning to participate actually in one of the lump sum topics in 22, please tell them that this video will exist, and so that we have a maximum impact. Thank you very much again to everybody, and I wish you a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.